Story 1. My sister stole my boyfriend. 6 years ago, my sister betrayed me in the worst way possible. She attacked me and stole my boyfriend. Now, my parents are trying to reconcile us by inviting her to my bridal shower. My sister is 26 and I am 28. After that horrible incident, we haven't spoken for years. Growing up, our parents never discouraged the fierce sibling rivalry between us. Instead, they encouraged competition, which only fueled our jealousy and resentment. As children, we sometimes set aside our differences, but as we got older, our animosity deepened. By high school, we barely spoke and we preferred it that way. When I left for college, I saw my sister only during visits home, which was more tolerable than being around someone I couldn't stand. Around my college graduation, I started dating my now fiancé. We had been friends for 3 years, and when he finally asked me out, I happily accepted. After 3 months of dating, I decided to bring him home to meet my parents. Unfortunately, my sister, who had just started college, was also home that weekend. Given our history, it was already a recipe for disaster. At that time, my life was going well. I had a loving boyfriend, a promising career, and my own apartment. My sister, however, wasn't doing as well. She had been rejected from her top college choice and struggled to make friends. My parents told me she was coming home frequently because she felt lonely at school. When I introduced my boyfriend to my family, my sister was visibly displeased. She sulked in the background, but then something strange happened. She suddenly turned on the charm and became unusually interested in my boyfriend's life. She kept trying to talk to him, making me uncomfortable. At first, I tried to ignore it, not wanting to expose our family dysfunction to my boyfriend. But things escalated quickly. She began openly flirting with him right in front of me. During dinner, she made no effort to hide her intentions. She was clearly trying to provoke me. My boyfriend and I were both uncomfortable, but we didn't want to cause a scene. However, I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped and told her to stop, calling her behavior disgusting. She rolled her eyes and continued, brushing off my anger. Then she said something that pushed me over the edge. "I'm just helping him see that he has options. He deserves better than you." Furious, I called her a jealous loser who couldn't stand seeing me happy. That remark struck a nerve. She lunged at me, grabbed my hair, and slapped me across the table. I was too shocked to react at first, but then the fight escalated. We scratched, slapped, and screamed at each other until our parents and my boyfriend pulled us apart. If my boyfriend hadn't taken me away, it might have lasted even longer. After that night, I cut my sister off completely. I refused to speak to her. Though we had fought before, this was the breaking point. My parents called me the next day, saying they had reprimanded her and hoped we could work things out, even though she refused to apologize. I told them I had no interest in making amends. I reminded them that they had encouraged our rivalry for years, so they shouldn't be surprised that we despised each other now. They didn't agree with my stance and we fought over the phone. A few days later, they called back to apologize, admitting their mistake. It felt meaningless at the time, but I forgave them. I decided to stay in contact with my parents, but my sister was dead to me. Now, 6 years later, we still don't talk. I see her at family gatherings, but we avoid each other. My parents maintain a normal relationship with her, and I don't mind as long as they don't push me to reconcile. Everyone in the family knows we don't get along, but no one knows the full story. Here is a lesson for you guys. Some relationships are too toxic to mend, and that's okay. Not all wounds need to be healed. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 2, The Whispering Shadows. In a quiet town, there was a storyteller named Mira who could hear whispers from the shadows. Some believed she was cursed, others thought she was gifted. One night, a desperate traveler sought her help. His sister had vanished without a trace. The shadows whispered a warning. The traveler had secrets of his own. As Mira unraveled the mystery, she discovered that the sister was never lost. She was escaping a dark truth. The traveler wasn't searching for his sister out of love, but to silence her. Mira had to decide whether to expose the truth or let it remain hidden. In the end, she chose to help the sister escape for good, revealing the man's deception to the town. Justice was served, but it left Mira wondering, how often do people wear masks hiding their true intentions? Here is a lesson for you guys. The truth always finds its way to the surface, but are we ready to face it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 3, The Painter's Last Canvas. Vincent was an artist known for capturing emotions so vividly that his paintings seemed to breathe. One day he received an unusual commission, to paint a woman he had never met. Yet, as he painted, every brushstroke felt hauntingly familiar. Memories he had never lived surfaced in his mind. He dreamt of her, saw glimpses of a past that wasn't his own. The woman in the painting was a lost love from another life. But was this fate giving them another chance or a cruel illusion? When the painting was finally complete, the woman arrived to collect it. The moment their eyes met, recognition flickered between them. She too had been seeing him in dreams. They were strangers, yet not. Faced with the unexplainable, Vincent had to choose: dismiss it as imagination or embrace the unknown connection. He took a leap of faith and in doing so found a love that transcended time. Here is a lesson for you guys. Some connections defy logic. Perhaps some souls are destined to meet again. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 4. The Clockmaker's Secret. In a small village there lived an old clockmaker named Elias, whose clocks never missed a second. Yet the villagers noticed something odd. Every night at midnight, all of Elias's clocks stopped for exactly 1 minute. Curious, a young apprentice named Theo decided to stay behind and observe. As the clocks halted, Elias whispered a name into the silence. Theo soon discovered that Elias had once lost the love of his life at midnight, and for years he had been trying to turn back time, even if just for a moment. One day, Elias gifted Theo his most treasured pocket watch, telling him, "Time moves forward but memories remain." When Elias passed away, his clocks finally ticked through midnight without stopping, as if he had finally let go. Lesson: holding on to the past can keep us from moving forward. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 5. The Door That Shouldn't Exist. Lena moved into an old apartment with a single rule from the landlord: never open the door at the end of the hall. She obeyed at first, but the curiosity gnawed at her. What was behind the door? One night she couldn't resist. She turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was filled with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of herself. Some younger, some older, some completely unfamiliar. A voice echoed, "Every choice you've made has shaped you. Are you happy with who you are?" Terrified, she fled, locking the door behind her. The next morning, the door was gone as if it had never existed. But Lena was changed. She now understood that every decision carried weight. Here is a lesson for you guys. The choices we make define who we become. Are you making choices you won't regret? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 5. The Door That Shouldn't Exist. Lena moved into an old apartment with a single rule from the landlord: never open the door at the end of the hall. She obeyed at first, but the curiosity gnawed at her. What was behind the door? One night she couldn't resist. She turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was filled with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of herself. Some younger, some older, some completely unfamiliar. A voice echoed, "Every choice you've made has shaped you. Are you happy with who you are?" Terrified, she fled, locking the door behind her. The next morning, the door was gone as if it had never existed. But Lena was changed. She now understood that every decision carried weight. Here is a lesson for you guys. The choices we make define who we become. Are you making choices you won't regret? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 6. The Man Who Wrote the Future. In a quiet town, an old writer named Harold lived alone, typing stories that no one ever read. One day he realized something strange. The events he wrote down started happening in real life. At first he tested it with small things like a neighbor finding a lost pet. But soon he dared to write bigger things: tragedies, miracles, and even love stories. Then Harold made a mistake. He wrote about his own death. Panicked, he tried to rewrite his fate, but the words on the page refused to change. The day arrived, and as the clock struck midnight, Harold vanished, leaving behind only his unfinished manuscript. The townspeople found his stories and realized their lives had been shaped by his words all along. Here is a lesson for you guys. Be careful with the stories you tell. Sometimes they shape reality more than you realize. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 7. The House That Dreamed. On the outskirts of town stood an abandoned house that no one dared to enter. Some said it was haunted. Others believed it was cursed. But one day, a young woman named Elise, searching for a place to stay, moved in. At first, the house seemed ordinary, but at night, it came alive with whispers. Each morning, Elise awoke to rearranged furniture, unfinished paintings appearing on the walls, and objects moving as if guided by unseen hands. The house wasn't haunted, it was dreaming. As days passed, Elise discovered that the house was trying to tell a story, showing glimpses of a past long forgotten. She pieced together the memories: the laughter of a family, a love story cut short, and a tragedy that left the house longing for closure. Determined, Elise searched town records and found that the family who once lived there had been separated by war, never reunited. She wrote their story, publishing it for the world to remember. That night, for the first time, the house was silent. Its dreams had finally been heard. Here is a lesson for you guys. Some stories are waiting to be told, and sometimes it's up to us to listen. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 8. The Stranger in the Photograph. Leo loved collecting old photographs from flea markets. One day he found a black and white picture of a group of people at a carnival. But something felt off. In the background there was a man staring directly at the camera, his eyes almost too sharp, too aware. Curious, Leo asked the vendor where the picture came from. That photo? It's over 100 years old, the vendor said. But when Leo looked closer, he froze. The man in the background was wearing modern clothes. Determined to uncover the truth, Leo researched the photo's origins. To his horror, he found the same man in multiple historical photographs, spanning centuries. The man never aged. That night, Leo heard a knock at his door. When he peered through the peephole, there he was, the man from the photo, staring back. Here is a lesson for you guys. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 9. The Forgotten Melody. Sophie was a gifted pianist, but after a tragic accident left her hands scarred, she refused to play again. One evening, while wandering through an old antique store, she found a dusty music box. When she wound it up, a melody played, a song she had never heard before, yet it felt strangely familiar. That night, she dreamed of a young woman playing the same tune on a grand piano. The next day, Sophie returned to the store, eager for answers. The shopkeeper told her the music box had once belonged to a pianist who lost her ability to play after a fire, much like Sophie. Determined, Sophie sat at her piano for the first time in years and tried to play. As she pressed the keys, the melody from the music box flowed effortlessly through her fingers, as if it had been waiting for her all along. In that moment, Sophie realized that music wasn't just in her hands, it was in her soul. Here is a lesson for you guys. Sometimes, what we think we've lost is just waiting to be found again. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now let's dive into the next story. Story 10. The Clockmaker's Secret. In a small village, there was a mysterious clockmaker named Edgar. His clocks were known to be the most precise in the world, but what fascinated people most was that his clocks never needed to be wound. They simply kept ticking, never stopping, never slowing. One day, a young apprentice named Theo was hired to work in Edgar's shop. Over time, he became obsessed with the secret behind the ever-ticking clocks. Late one night, when Edgar had gone to bed, Theo crept into the workshop and opened the back of one of the clocks. What he found sent chills down his spine. Inside each clock was a tiny, beating heart. Edgar caught Theo in the act and sighed. "You weren't supposed to know," he murmured. "Every clock I make carries a fragment of my own time. As long as they tick, so do I. But now that you know the secret, a choice must be made." Theo never spoke of what happened that night, but from that day forward, he worked in the shop with a new understanding. And years later, when Edgar finally passed, the clocks in the village all stopped at the same moment. Here is a lesson for you guys. Time is the most precious thing we have. How we use it defines us. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Which story was your favorite? Let's discuss below. Each of these stories carried a unique lesson, but now we want to hear from you. Which story resonated with you the most? Which lesson spoke to your heart? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring even more incredible stories your way. See you in the next one.